Your triggers are the greatest roadmap you can use to get every single thing you want in life. This is about taking radical responsibility for how we feel every minute of the day, and this is about taking radical responsibility for our lives. Welcome to another episode of Empowering from Within with me, Phoebe. I'm so happy to have you here. I have truly life-changing information to give you today. Truly life-changing knowledge and truly life-changing tools that will transform how you feel and every single area of your life. And it all starts with emotional mastery and taking complete and utter radical responsibility for how you feel. Today's episode is all about emotions mastery. It's about using our triggers as a roadmap to get everything we want in life. Okay, a lot of people talk about triggers as something to manage, as something to numb, as something to just constantly kind of placate and band-aid, but not actually shift at the root so that they don't need to keep popping up and popping up and popping up. Because what happens in life is our emotions are extremely important, vital information to tell us when we are out of balance. If we want to live fulfilling lives, feeling good, in a good mood, have harmonious relationships, be in internal peace, live with clarity, make good decisions, we need to have our fight or flight system under control. We need to have emotions mastery. And I think people are getting better at understanding what a trigger is or when they feel triggered, but we are still quite limited in our language of emotions. A lot of people don't know exactly how to pinpoint what they're feeling. A lot of people can't handle the discomfort of emotions in their body, and so they immediately go to medication, to numbing, to just basically running from it, seeking control, offloading on someone else. And there are just much better ways and tools to handle our emotions and our triggers and come back into balance. And our consciousness and our ability to use parts of our brain to the greatest capacity and to reach our potential is governed by the level of emotion that we're running at the current time. So there is a pretty well formulated scale of consciousness that goes from 0 to 1,000, where I think science has already proved we are all made of atoms and particles existing within energetic fields. And when our energy is impacted by our emotions, I'm sure you've experienced feeling heavy, constricted, off, crying, triggered. They're the more obvious signs and symptoms. But even just a little bit of a inside is lowering your consciousness and putting you into the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze state so that you can no longer make high frequency, high conscious decisions. You can no longer respond to people in a high frequency, high conscious way. And the lowest emotion on the frequency scale is shame. Other low emotions are guilt, anger, judgment, pride, desire. And then as you go back up to around the 200, 250 mark, you raise your consciousness into expansive, more positive emotions. And I'm not saying that positive means better. Negative emotions are just a way to describe those kind of lower frequency, lower consciousness emotions that will have you in a survival state. And when you're living your life in a survival state, you're going to have really stressful relationships. You're going to make decisions around your career and finances from a stressed survival state, just trying to keep yourself safe and not actually expanding and reaching your greatest potential in this life. So your emotions are here to tell you when you're out of balance. And you are always out of balance because you are running an old program. You've hit some kind of wound. You are believing something. You have a belief or a limiting worldview that is making you feel constricted and shameful or guilty or whatever it is. You're bumping up against memories that bring down your emotion. I mean, the amount of stimulus we have in a day as humans in the modern age is a lot. We're not supposed to have dings and alerts and phones and laptops and doorbells and intercoms constantly beeping and buzzing, and getting calls from unknown numbers can just set us off into fight or flight mode. And then we go about our day, but we start spinning our wheels and spinning our loops, and we're suddenly operating most of our day in a fight or flight situation. And what I've come to learn is that every single emotion can be processed, can be shifted, can be understood at the root cause. So instead of just like trimming the garden of emotions and putting band-aids over things, we get to the actual root of the weed, pull it out, and shift the belief so that we can have fertile soil and grow better, more advantageous plants than all the old weeds that we've been carrying around our whole lives. So instead of looking outside of ourselves at the thing that triggered us in isolation, we need to actually go within, reflect, and evaluate what we're making that thing mean about us. This is about taking radical responsibility for how we feel every minute of the day, and this is about taking radical responsibility for our lives. And when you start to shift into higher states of consciousness and into higher frequencies, and you maintain that consciousness by doing the reps at the gym and constantly mastering your emotions, then your life begins to elevate because you're operating in an energetic field of higher emotions, wider perspectives. You are able to reach your potential, have the confidence and the courage and the sharp discernment to make decisions that are in your favor and in the highest good of everyone involved. And you're no longer operating simply in a survival state to keep you and your stuff and your family safe. And it's an absolute game changer. And I think what a lot of people miss with the numbing or shoving down method, which I have definitely been a participant of the shove down method for a lot of my 20s and 30s. I certainly did not have the emotional processing tools I have today. And I used to run from my emotions and run from my triggers, and I tried to achieve them away. I tried to drink them away. I tried to try to success them away, basically. But what I didn't understand was that shove down, shame, fear, anger, guilt are still an energetic frequency of shame, anger, fear, guilt. No matter which way you slice it, it doesn't matter if it's shoved down and you're not consciously aware of it, it is still going to run your life until you are able to articulate it, name it, bring it out into the light of the day, and shift it at the root. So that is what we're going to get into today. And what you'll find is that it is one of the most powerful moves that you can make, because you are going to feel so internally resourced. You are going to feel like a mighty oak tree in any calamity or chaos going on around you. And whatever weather life is throwing at you, you will no longer be a flimsy leaf in the wind, needing life to go a certain way for you to feel okay. You are going to be able to take your power back out of people's circumstances, situations, and needing them to roll out a red carpet for you. And you're going to be able to actually just manage your internal weather, no matter what's happening around you, and be that mighty oak tree in any good, bad, indifferent situation. And the level of strength and resourcefulness that I feel, having been mastering my emotions for a few years now, is the greatest sense of internal peace I've ever experienced. Not only do I know always how to shift to get back into a natural, expansive, elevated mood, but I'm no longer afraid of people, things, and situations not going my way or treating me any type of way, because I know whatever goes down, I have the tools necessary to shift however I feel about anything and come back to a state of peace. I'm no longer wrangling with reality and fighting reality to do what I want it to do to feel okay. And we all know that living in a state of positivity and an elevated consciousness is obviously a much more pleasant life to live, but the only way to get there is through our triggers and through our wounds and through our pain points. We cannot shove down the pain and not address it and slap positivity on top of it. It does not work. I've tried it so dang hard. The greatest, fastest path to every single thing you want in life is through your wounds and triggers and processing every single one of them. Because when we don't address our emotions and our wounds and our pain points and all the crap we're carrying around with us from a lifetime of, challenges and difficulties and misinterpretations and whatever else has gone on in our lives, loss and mistakes and shame-worthy moments, when we're just dragging all of that around and not actually processing it, it doesn't matter how good your external life gets. It doesn't matter if you marry the person of your dreams, have 2.5 perfect children, live in a perfect dream home, have your dream career. If you don't feel good and if you don't know how to manage your emotions, you will not be able to enjoy a second of it. And there will never be enough to fill up your wounds, and there will never be enough to run and numb from your wounds and triggers and emotions and pain. And you are gonna have to keep running faster and keep gathering more and more and more success and people and whatever it may be to make you feel okay. And a much simpler way to go about life is to take how you feel into your own hands and take your dependency on the stuff, the people, the success in inverted commas. Take your power out of all of that and master your emotions internally. And then the wonderful thing that happens is that your external life starts to match your internal state. And so not only you feel resourced, but your life gets way better because you're operating at a higher level of consciousness and you are able to see solutions that other people don't see. You are able to remain calm in a room, in high stakes environments. You are able to not be manipulated because you can't be played when you already feel safe and you already feel confident and you already feel good enough by anyone. And you start to make decisions and take actions in line with that more elevated consciousness, and then your life starts to unfold in a way that is like better than you could have ever imagined from a time when you were running from your wounds or operating solely from your wounds and trying to make your ego and your wounded self feel okay. So that's the hard sell on emotions mastery. The other point I would make about trying to heal from the outside in with the plant medicine or the pills or achievements or the success or the people or the parties or the trips or the status or the Instagram feed, whatever it is that you are investing in to try and help you to feel better, is human beings don't change from an outside event. It has been studied that people who win the lottery or end up in a wheelchair from an accident go back to their level of happiness from before those events a year after they have either hit the big time or had a terrible loss or terrible calamity. And it takes a certain amount of pattern recognition to create lasting and sustained change. And there are 8 areas in our lives that sort of make up the foundation of our lives. So there is career, family, financial, mental, passion, hobby, physical, social, and spiritual. And what tends to happen is that we have repeating lessons to learn in a lifetime, and repeating sort of soul lessons and wounding that occur usually early on in our lives. So in childhood is the initial stone throw. We might go through something that makes us feel inadequate. And then just like you throw a stone into a pond, if we don't address the stone's throw, the ripples get louder and louder and louder. And you'll start to see that if you look around your life, the same pattern and the same wound is popping up in all areas. So if you feel inadequate, and inadequacy's been one of mine. So I felt inadequate from early childhood when I discovered I was the third unplanned pregnancy for my parents, and not necessarily as chosen and desired as my older brother and sister. And so suddenly it started a program in my mind of comparison and trying to figure out how I could be as worthy as they were. So this wound of inadequacy has rippled through every single area of my life. I have felt deeply physically inadequate as a disabled person, which I have shifted. I have felt inadequate because of my finances, whether they are large or whether they are small. In both scenarios, I have felt terrified and deeply inadequate making financial decisions when I am in charge of a larger budget, and I have felt deeply scared and inadequate when I have had financial strain. I have felt inadequate in career, depending on my job title or depending on the people around me doing better than me. I have felt inadequate mentally because I have low vision, and often people mistake having low vision for being a bit vague or blasé, because I can't see the social cues and details that other people can see, and sometimes I have to ask like where the doorway is or the exit is. I have felt inadequate in socially. I felt inadequate. Obviously, my family was the first place. It's rippled through every single area of my life. And these things become like facts. Like I truly believed that I was inadequate because of my physical disabilities. That didn't feel like a belief to me. That felt like an actuality and a fact. And it kept popping up. I have shifted this now. And I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you about this a few years ago, say 5-6 years ago, because I didn't want to draw attention to it, because I was like, this is true. And if I tell someone, then like I'm serving myself up on a platter to be destroyed here. But I can say it out loud without any hesitation, because now I have shifted it. I know it is completely untrue and is completely inaccurate, because I actually have gone to the root of this emotion and shifted the underlying belief that my physical disabilities make me inadequate by seeing that actually operating with 3 less limbs and legal blindness makes me quite extraordinarily, overly physically adequate, because I'm doing what everyone else is doing out here, but I'm doing it at quite a serious disadvantage. And I am still able to keep up with my peers in all areas of life. And I'm doing it at a great, handicap, which is the definition of, when someone has an advantage, they are often handicapped to put an arm behind their back to give everyone else an advantage and make it a fair playing field. So I now have an image of myself as someone who is so overly adequate, who is an excellent problem solver, workshop arounder, deeply adaptive and flexible, and excellent at finding solves and solutions for any task, no matter the circumstances, because of my physical disabilities. Like me just making a meal in my kitchen is a feat of extraordinary physical capability. I am balancing things and juggling things and preparing things at quite a serious disadvantage, and I'm doing it using extra sensitivities. I'm using my hearing and feeling senses in ways that other people can't. I'm using my energetic feedback to try and read the room. I'm balancing on a pair of prosthetic legs. I mean, this is some pro level athlete type ability that I have here. So I've been able to flip my underlying root emotion of inadequacy into something that extremely elevated and positive for me and helped me to actually reach my potential, because I didn't actually see within myself the amazing advantages that some of my physical differences gave me. I didn't actually see how efficient I can be, how adaptive I can be, as I say, the incredible problem solving and over sensitivities and heightened abilities in other areas. I actually missed all of that when I was in the frequency and the emotion of feeling inadequate and comparing myself to others constantly. So shifting that emotion has been deeply beneficial to me. It has helped me reach my potential, and it has obviously elevated my mood and consciousness and energy in huge ways, because I'm no longer running this program constantly of feeling inadequate next to everyone. And it's rippled out through all areas of my life, where I now feel more confident and resourced and able to make higher stakes decisions, knowing that I have all these incredible qualities that I wouldn't have without my disabilities. So that is an example of shifting difficult emotion. Now, how did I get there? Well, the number one thing and tool that I want to give you today is noticing when you feel emotional and triggered, because often we miss when we have tipped into and flipped over into a negative and constricting emotion. You know, it's very easy to take for granted when we feel expansive, natural, light, full of beans, full of energy. And then usually it is it's always a very specific thing that we can pinpoint that flipped us into spinning our wheels and feeling emotional and feeling triggered, feeling constricted, feeling off, just generally stressed, whatever it may be. And we often miss the exact pinpoint of the flip, and we tend to then just blame whatever next thing comes up or whatever obviously stressful situation occurs. An example of missing the flip is, for me, like this morning, my dog was woofing her head off outside at the neighbors, and I started to feel really, really stressed that it was kind of disrupting them, and they were going to be annoyed that she was yipping and yapping and making such a noise. She was actually barking at a lizard, but I was like, oh, this is not good. And I kind of went into like a I kind of went a little bit overly stressed, went out there, quickly scooped her up in my arms, locked her inside. And then I noticed that I was off and feeling like a bit of a knot, like an energetic knot in my solar plexus as I went about my day. And I felt a little bit snappy. And I was like, oh, great. I've obviously flipped my emotions. Let me trace back. And it's often helpful to go back in our mind's eye to where we have just been in a physical sense, like what room we were in, and then go back to the room before that, or the place before that, or the car, or wherever you've been. Retrace your steps and figure out, like, I was feeling good there, I was feeling good there. When did I flip? And I realized, I listened to a podcast that was talking about something that flipped within me, a memory of something I did in my 20s. And I was like suddenly in like spirals of shame, but I genuinely had missed it. And when my dog started barking, it kind of escalated, and I started to really notice it in my body that I was spinning and feeling low. And I was able to retrace, and I was like, oh, I was outside listening to that podcast on a walk, and it brought up that memory of something that I had done, and I felt really guilty and silly, and I was in a shame spiral. And as soon as I was able to articulate exactly what it was, my brain could let it go and no longer had to chew on this problem that it was, our brains are threat detectors. So as soon as it was like, ding, 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 alarms going off, we are, in a threat mode. We need to run for safety, because I had been flooded with stress and shame from this memory popping up on the back of this podcast. I, at my next available opportunity, sat down and looked at and was able to articulate and went through these journal prompts, which I'm happy to send you. It took me about 2 minutes to see, oh, I'm feeling shame. I'm feeling like a bad person. Why? How? I added context to the memory. I saw that I had made different choices for the preceding however many years, 15 years, and that, we all make mistakes, gave myself some compassion. I've already changed my ways, and I was able to shift and elevate myself out of my own self-made shame spiral by understanding what it is that I was feeling. Because before having these emotional mastery tools, I would have just thought it was completely to do with my dog, and I would have panicked and freaked out that I've upset the neighbors because of the dog. But the only reason my dog yapping set me off was because I had already flipped into a negative state. And so the number one incredible emotions mastery tool before all the other tools is to catch when you flip, because that is the most vital information that you can have in decoding all of your wounds and triggers. And instead of carrying around that shame for another 15 years, I shifted it at the root cause and was able to elevate my consciousness and my frequency. And there are plenty of tools that I can give you once you have mastered the flip. And what actually happens after having done this work, I can tell you your hippocampus, your memory center of the brain, actually grows, and you train it to notice the flip so much quicker and so much more easily. It can be difficult. I remember when I first started this work, it was a little bit of a training experimental, building that muscle situation to always catch the flip, because we tend to spin and get into that fight or flight, and our brain goes offline and we can't catch when it happened. But the more you do it, the easier it is to catch yourself when you flip. And it is so incredibly life-changing to not only catch it, but to understand the exact pinpoint of what flipped you, and then to address that and not just blanketly numb or chase or run away from those uncomfortable feelings that we get and those uncomfortable emotions that we experience. And I was able to process the shame, alchemize it, transmute it, shift it at its core, and raise my consciousness and live a better life because I caught the exact thing. I could have been spinning my wheels about my dog for way too long, but I actually caught the specific thing that had upset me and set off my emotions. Now, another thing I want to do is give you some language for emotions and some sort of body tells for what emotions you might be feeling, because often our brain will spin and go into fight or flight when we have not connected it to our body, or our body will express and go into great emotion when we haven't clocked it in our mind. So connecting the two together by articulating exactly what you're feeling and catching the flip is such a key part of emotions mastery. So fear and anxiety and uncertainty, the symptoms of those are usually your brain is spinning, you cannot let something go, you're like a dog with a bone, you feel heartburn or chest constriction. That is often fear and anxiety. And there are a lot of tools for anxiety I can give you, but first we need to articulate that that is the exact emotion you are feeling. Feeling inadequate is often like a lump in your solar plexus and a knot in your solar plexus. That is shame, guilt, feeling like you've done something wrong, a mistake. It's a very uncomfortable feeling in your abdomen. Can also be like heat running down your limbs. And that's another key sign that you're in fight or flight, is that all the blood is rushing to your limbs. Anger, for me, is crying. I'm not sure about other women out there, but I find crying is a key tell of anger. It's like this frustration that I have been taught often throughout childhood that anger was not a welcome emotion. And so I often find it hard to express anger in any other way but crying, because I feel so uncomfortable in my body, and I often don't know what it is until I start crying and I'm like, oh, this is anger for me. Anger obviously also is like irritability, snapping at people, frustration, feeling like a real constriction and a trapped sensation in your body. Grief, again, crying. Loss and grief are often like a monsoon of tears, really heavy, wet tears, energy in your abdomen, and obviously everyone knows what it feels like to cry. And often loss is best processed through a really big cry and then alchemizing and shifting the root cause underneath the loss, because often the belief under loss is that we are making that loss mean something about us. Same as anger, we are making things mean something about us when we are angry, devastated, grief-stricken, shame-ridden. We're making it mean that we could have prevented it. We're making it mean that I have been disrespected, that we are insignificant, that people don't care about us, that we are not as good as everyone else, that, you know, there's something we could have done, that we've made a terrible mistake. You know, all of these very, very painful limiting beliefs are usually what is underneath the emotion. We are making some kind of situation or circumstance outside of us mean something terrible about ourselves. And when we can catch the flip, name the emotion, and then get to the root cause of the belief underneath that emotion, then we can start to flip it. We can add more context. We can question the validity of the belief underneath it. And almost always, a limiting, imbalanced belief out of context and not seeing both sides. And it is our bodies freaking out and our brain freaking out, going into survival mode, because we're believing something that isn't true. And it feels true because a belief is a thought that we've had more than around 64 times for something to feel true, like a knowing. But once we start to flip the beliefs and see them in a more balanced perspective, then we start to think thoughts that are shifting them, and with a greater perspective and a greater consciousness. And once we do 64 reps of the new thought, then we suffocate and atrophy the old neural pathways that formed that belief, and we start to build and create big, fat, juicy neural pathways for beliefs that are much, much, much healthier, more balanced, more unconditionally loving, more full of courage and strength and unconditional love and compassion and grace and all the beautiful elevated emotions. And we literally rewire our brain. We rewire our subconscious mind, and we shift our entire reality by doing this emotions mastery work. So I cannot recommend it highly enough. We all know that emotions and stress are linked to physical health. They are linked to harmonious, happy relationships, to thriving in our careers. And that is the definition of true success. When we are thriving in our health, when we have quality, harmonious, meaningful, connected relationships, when we are not blaming everyone and every single thing outside of us for how we feel, and when we are doing what we came here to do and thriving in career, that is living a good life, that is empowering from within, and that is taking radical responsibility for how we feel in our own lives, which at the end of the day is the most powerful thing we can do. You know, no one can do it for us. Our spouse can't do it for us. Our kids can't do it for us. The government can't do it for us. Our boss can't do it for us. Nobody can build our dream life except for us. And getting really, really good at mastering your emotions and tracking your wounds and triggers is the number one way to start to master your entire life and to start to see some of the limiting, painful beliefs that we have been operating under often through no fault of our own, through life circumstances, childhood programming, school, society. We're not taught to master our emotions, and we have gone through life making events and circumstances and challenges mean certain painful things about us that are not true. And so going into our pain and our wounds, processing them and shifting the beliefs underneath them to create new, beautiful beliefs creates a new and beautiful life. If you want more information on emotions mastery, empowering from within, or any tools whatsoever, head to my website, phoebestewart.com, and I will be absolutely thrilled to help you further. Thank you so much for being here today. If you want to keep hanging out, because I sure do, then head to my Instagram @PhoebesGram or my website, phoebestewart.com.